I wanna sing about them, man, we tried, still fighting for it. After 10 years in jail, I believe that one day I'll see the man free again. He goes on with a smile. I wanna sing so loud so you can hear me now. Free the man, free Mumia, free the soul of the voiceless. Free the man, free Mumia, free the soul of the voiceless.
Sehr schön.
Hallo, die meisten von Ihnen haben...
Now, most of you have probably heard reports by or about Mumia, a former Black Panther, Black American journalist who's been in prison for years now for a murder he never committed. He's become a symbol of a racist state in which discrimination is closely linked to economic exploitation. In many places in the US, Black Lives Matter is trying to combat these structures. Often it would seem just to be superficial things. I went to Philadelphia last year and I saw just how this issue is important. You still have a racist mayor and I also experienced that of the 788 public sculptures, only one honors those who suffered under slavery. There is a great deal of poverty among Black people in the US. The income of this community is apparently now less now than it was before 1964. And we see this in areas that are like slums around Philadelphia. The U.S. Justice Ministry has confirmed that 2011 more Black Americans or African Americans have been exploited, and Mumia has been combating a political system which means that it is systematically excluding 1/3 of the population. Half-hearted reforms like those under Obama changed a little bit, but one of the difficulties that we see is the alliance between police, justiciary, and a public-private penitentiary system which has more or less introduced slavery again and forced labor. And we see copycats of this in Europe, in the UK, Belgium, Spain, and Germany. Everyone after this conference that go by the A2 highway should look to the left to see the largest private prison in the country. Mumia Abu-Jamal has often reported to us about his struggles against capital punishment, prisons, slavery, and liberation. And today he is also going to address us again, talking about the resistance of Black Americans in the 21st century with a message specially created for us. But we mustn't forget that Mumia Abu-Jamal is affected by this oppression and that his life has been nearly destroyed as well. Many of you will remember that he and the Solidarity movement from 2015 to 2017 have fought for his treatment for hepatitis C. Finally, international pressure persuaded the prisons to treat him, but he's got liver cirrhosis because the treatment was delayed so long, and also he has a skin disease that has become almost unbearable earlier this month. He can hardly sleep. His entire body is bleeding. He's fighting to try to be able to see external physicians that he trusts. At the Free Mumia stand, you will find people who will give you suggestions as to how you can support Mumia directly. In a few days, on the 17th of January, on Wednesday, there's going to be a very important court case date which could give him a new trial, a retrial, which would make it impossible for him to finally combat the injustice that is carried out, not least because the court case doesn't want to release crucial files, not least the files that incriminated Mumia illegally, and have refused him a court of appeal. So this is something that the judiciary system has taken 25 years to address. Now, all of us know that Mumia Abu-Jamal would have already been killed, executed without international support, but all of us are continuing to fight for his life and his fight. Thus, for example, last month in demonstrations in Frankfurt, in Berlin, in Paris, and in Mexico City and in Philadelphia. Please add your email to the lists of the stands and donate if you can, because there's still a great deal that needs to be done.
Black resistance in the new century. Meinen Freunden at the Rosa-Luxemburg-Conference. Wie geht's es Ihnen? Guten Tag. I wish to provide some insights into struggles in Black America, some of which gives us hope that new forms of struggle are emerging in the face of a system of state repression and violence against Black life. First, the Black Lives Matter movement, begun by 3 young women of color, has seized the attention of young activists around the U.S. and focused public attention on the state terrorism of American police and their violence against Black life. Surprisingly, many Black Lives Matter demonstrations featured as many white activists as Black ones, but they do far more than demonstrate. In at least 3 American cities, Sanford, Florida, Chicago, Illinois, and Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, Black Lives Matter people have played a pivotal role in the removal and/or installation of local prosecutors. They're making change happen on the ground. They have protested, politicians sat in at police so-called union halls and heckled politicians to raise the names and cases of people killed by cops. Secondly, especially in the South, a movement is emerging against the right wing, led by a preacher, Reverend Dr. William Barber. This movement has especially built on what Reverend Barber has called fusion politics, or working coalitions across racial, ethnic, class, and gender lines. It has fought for economic rights through unionization moves of poor workers. It has stood against legal stigmatization against LGBTQ people. It has opposed the death penalty, and it has become a force to be reckoned with in the state of its birth, North Carolina. Reverend Barber has written a book entitled The Third Reconstruction, a reference that recalls the era following the U.S. Civil War, the 1960s era civil rights movement, and the present movement, which fusion politics has made a possibility to beat back a right-wing surge in the South and across the nation. According to Reverend Dr. Barber, states across the U.S. South are clamoring to join this multi-ethnic, multicultural, and multi-causal movement. Reverend Dr. Barber is an acolyte of the late Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and his movement is clearly modeled after the civil rights movement, of which King was its personification. And yet, it's also the fruit of bitter U.S. history, one of epic slavery, brutality, and profound economic exploitation. Thus, we see the abrupt eruption of social movements rolling through Black America, divided as much by geography as by generation. Youth, impatient for change, fly towards the loud impetuosity of Black Lives Matter. Middle-aged adults, especially those with religious leanings, are attracted to the king-like Moral Mondays movement, which has attracted tens of thousands of people at demonstrations, as exampled by the Reverend Dr. Barber. Both reflect profound discontent with the antagonistic status quo in today's America. This also reflects a reality of black life, whether in the North, where Black Lives Matter predominates, or in the South, where Moral Mondays movements are more active. Both also share another feature that was not so overtly present during the movement of the 1960s. White, Asian, Latino, Muslim, Jewish, and gay activists have joined these movements that emerged in black strife and pain. These multicultural allies and cohorts, therefore, gives these movements more gravity, more credibility, and more weight. It is thus not so easy to isolate black activists. Among U.S. academics and scholars, the notion of intersectionality is the flavor of this period. These movements are taking that theory and giving it life. It should also be noted that we see these movements grow, expand, and strengthen in the cold aftermath of the age of Obama. Indeed, Black Lives Matter were quite active during the closing stanzas of Obama's presidency. In the wake of Trump, they have only gained strength. Many were quietly critical of Obama's failure to address their concerns. They also reacted coldly to the presidential possibilities of Hillary Clinton, especially after videotape emerged of her saying that black and brown youth were, quote, super predators, unquote, who needed, like dogs, quote, to be brought to heel. That's the state of play in America today.
Vielen Dank, Abidile. Wir sprechen Mumia Abu-Jamal.
Der letzte auf Deutsch. Er hat schon so oft